Welcome back, everyone. And in our last session, we looked at academic voice. Today, we are moving on to argument and structure. So, as you know, academic writing requires a balance of clarity, evidence, and organization. And that is by our very famous writer, Stella Cottrell. I'm sure some of you would be very familiar with some of her works. If you aren't, I suggest go to the library and check those out. Okay, so by the end of this session, you should be feeling confident in building strong arguments in your essays. Okay, so by your second year, students are most likely expected to demonstrate not only formal and objective voice, but also critical awareness. So precision, conciseness, they are all key to your writing. And your academic voice that we looked at last week should show confidence and the ability to evaluate sources. Okay, so what makes strong academic writing? I'm sure you've heard this ad nauseum from your lecturers, but let's get into it one more time. Okay, so at this stage, your thesis should be arguable and situated within wider debate. So if you remember, we looked at academic voice and we were looking at how not just to present facts, but also a well-rounded version of understanding the topic. Okay, so this is what we're going to focus on today. So your organization must be sophisticated and weaving multiple sources together. And your writing should go beyond summary into critique. And when you show this, it demonstrates higher level thinking. Okay. So think of this as a triangle. The voice is how you sound, argument is what you were saying, and structure is how you will guide the reader. Okay, so multifaceted. So together they create persuasive writing. And that's what we want to really look at and engage in today. Okay, so with your basic paragraph structure, you want to incorporate PEE. This may sound familiar to you because most of you may be using it. If you're not using it, I highly suggest that you start to use it, okay? And what is PEE? PEE is basically the way you are structuring your paragraphs. Number one, it will have your point. It's going to be clear, easy to understand, and it's going to have an arguable topic sentence. Now, your topic sentence, of course, you know, is at the first sentence of your paragraph, okay? And following in the E is evidence, and that's high quality academic sources, okay? We want to use academic sources that have been vetted by other that are vetted, that are peer reviewed, and come from universities of high repute. Okay, like I said before, I would advise you to stay away from a student's own thesis, even though it has been accepted, but go after works that are well known in that area. Okay, so we want high quality academic resources. We want them to be integrated and, of course, cited. So make sure you are adding in all your citations. And the last E is explain, or it could be A for analyze. It could be P or P. So where you're going to be having a critical evaluation and you're going to link to a wider debate. So remember, your evidence should come from peer-reviewed and high-quality sources. Don't just drop in a quote. I know we have done that in first year. We just wanted to get those quotes in. We wanted to be like, okay, I am referencing my work. And that was great for first year, okay? But now in second year, we have to integrate it seamlessly. So it's not just a random quote I've come across while reading an academic journal, but it's something that is really relating to my point, to my argument, that supports my argument. The shows I've analyzed various sources and I've chosen information that supports that. So you also want to make sure you are analyzing critically and, of course, linking to the wider arguments in literature. All right, so let's have an example of weak writing and strong writing. Okay, so let's go first with our weak. So, first one, many students struggle with time management. Studies show that this is common. Okay, like I said, this sounds very familiar to what you may read in a newspaper or if you are reading a blog, because it just sounds very standard. Now, it may come across as quite descriptive. You may nod along and be like, yeah, that's a good point that's made. However, you will notice there's a lack of referencing in it, and it's a very generic statement, okay? That's not backed up by information. It reads more as an opinion than a fact. Now, even though there may be studies supporting what's written here in the sentence, and it may be technical, therefore true, there isn't any evidence to support this, and at this point, it's just hearsay. It's my view of understanding and not balancing it because some students may struggle with time management, but why may they struggle with time management? There's multifaceted reasons, and it doesn't touch on this. Studies show this is common. Which type of studies? When were these studies done? Were they done pre-COVID, post-COVID? What age group have these studies been done? So this statement leaves us with more questions than answers, okay? So let's have a look at a strong sentence. Okay, so effective time management is a key in academic success. And we have Mackin 2010 found that students with structured schedules achieved higher grades. Okay, so now we have a reference that's being used. We are integrating the author. Okay, so we're using the author to sort of support our argument that if you have a structured schedule, you will achieve a higher grade. And ending off with this suggests, so you're now doing an analysis of what you've just said. This suggests that teaching time management strategies could directly improve student performance. Okay, so let's compare the both. The weak version is quite descriptive, but the strong one is analytical. Okay, like we said, we're all aware of this. In academic writing, you leave emotions out and feelings. You simply want to state the facts. Now, notice the inclusion of NAC in 2010. This is our author, which demonstrates the importance of time management. And of course, by linking your evidence to your significance, your argument now becomes persuasive because now the reader is saying, okay, there is studies or there have been studies done on this, and now you're quoting one of those said studies. Okay. And obviously, you can develop that even further. You may say, Christine, 2010, quite dated, it's 15 years ago, and I'll agree with you. That's another point that you could say. The strong sentence can be improved. Okay. You can use more current references. You can also delve into a reference that's saying, which age group are you talking about? So even though the stronger sentence sounds better, there's still improvements that can be made to it. Okay, so let's look at linking transitions. So your transitions and your linking paragraphs. So basically you should use transitions to signal the development of complex arguments. So you may have various things that you want to talk about and you're wondering, how do I put these across? They're so varied, they're so different. I need to string them together. And transitions are your one way of doing that, okay? So you may have used your symbol connectors like however or moreover. I would suggest going over to the academic word list, have a look at those words and incorporate some of those words in your writing, okay? So you want to make sure you are focusing on coherence across the essay And you want to show how each point builds towards the thesis. And I think something we always need to remember is that every information that we include in our assignments, our essays, reports, should be proofread and it should be edited. Okay. So edit, and edit some more. Make sure your points are following in a coherent manner. You're coming across in a very distinct, easily understood manner. And all your main points should ultimately focus on your thesis. Okay. So you also want to try and incorporate the fact that each of your paragraphs should not only connect to your thesis, but also to the wider scholarly conversation. Now, that's quite an interesting point, and I just want to remind you, you may think, okay, I'm just studying here. I'm in my second, third year. I haven't contributed anything towards the academic world, but get in the mindset of someday you will. And how do you do that? By constant practice. So if you think of your essay as going to be contributing to a journal out there, then you'll be like, okay, let me write this so it can stand up to academic scrutiny. Okay. So think about your work being important and having meaning and having an impact on the wider academic society. Okay, so let's look at this. Building a strong introduction. So basically, your introductions before could have been just touching on your topic, speaking about what you're going to write about. But now we really want to focus on a strong introduction. And I would say when you are writing an introduction, think about how it will engage with academic debates and highlight research gaps. So your thesis should clearly be arguable, but not descriptive. And this is going to demonstrate your maturity in handling sources and context. You can just excuse me for 1 second. Okay, so when you are writing your introduction, provide academic context, think about current debates or any research gaps that exist in the field. Of course, narrow your specific focus and present a strong and arguable thesis. So when you are handling resources and context and adding that into your introduction, it's going to show academic maturity. Okay, so now we go right to the other end, and that is your conclusion. So your conclusion sometimes does get a lot of students stumped, and they're like, I'm not sure what to add in the conclusion. I got my strong introduction. I've written my paragraphs incorporating P, and I'm just a bit stuck as into what goes into a good paragraph. Okay, so don't you fret. A good paragraph will focus on these three aspects, okay? Summarizing your key points. Now, if you are not sure what your key points are, I would go back and suggest you look at your topic sentences, and that will be your key point, okay? Because each topic sentence will then have a paragraph developed after it. So go back, read your topic sentences, and take those and incorporate them into your conclusion. Now, very importantly, restate your thesis in different words, okay? Don't try and rewrite your introduction. I know it's very, very tempting to do so, but a conclusion is separate from an introduction. I know people think they're part and parcel, they're just topsy-turvy. However, when you stated your introduction, you had yet to provide evidence, you yet to support your argument. It was just saying, this is what I will delve into. This is current research, these are research gaps. However, at the end, when you're doing your conclusion, you've already demonstrated your argument. So now you will end off with showing the significance of what you've written or the significance of your topic. Okay, so your conclusion shouldn't repeat your introduction. I just want to state that again. And instead, it should summarize your arguments, look to your topic sentences, restate your thesis in different words, and emphasize the significance of your topic. And this is going to help your reader understand why your argument matters. Okay, so just imagine the reader has read your essay or your report, and they've read through each argument and they're like, okay, that sounds really good, but I'm still a bit undecided about my view of this topic. And then your conclusion is sort of like your last attempt to show them your view of this matter that you have written about. Okay, so it's like the last guiding nudge towards what you have spoken about in your essay. Okay, so let's talk about common pitfalls that I, of course, have experienced in my academic journey. And some of the most common ones are surprisingly an over-reliance on description. Now, you may say, I'm not describing things. It's not an English literature essay where I'm talking about the nuances of the sunsets and like the orange hue and the pink hues. I'm not doing that. Why would you say description? Okay, so I just want to go back to illustrate my point for the weak. Okay, now the weak sentence or statement was very opinionated. It was a very general stance. It's basically just saying, this is a general overview. I've yet to investigate anything relating to this. It's just based off my common view. So we may write like this without even knowing it, okay? So if you feel like your writing is too vague, it doesn't have research attached to it, you're not attaching your voice with it, then that is descriptive writing, okay? Move away from your understanding of English descriptive writing and into academic descriptive writing. So I would say if you are guilty of writing like this, like I have been in the past, this is what we want to walk away from and instead incorporate multiple resources. Add in our understanding of those resources. Remember, it doesn't just need to be add in a resource, but it's got to show understanding of those resources. So we want to avoid using descriptive. See, we want to avoid using descriptive sentences. Okay. Very importantly, what else that may come across in our writing is a lack of critical evaluation. Now, this is something we have to learn to incorporate, okay? Because sometimes you read these journals and you say, okay, this is what they're stating, therefore it is true. It has been peer reviewed, therefore it is true, okay? And I understand that because, of course, all of research that has been vetted should be on the correct path. However, we're not saying critical review as in saying that is wrong. Critical review or evaluation will be basically saying, okay, you have done your study in time management, and you were saying a proper schedule helps students get good grades, and that was from our strong statement. However, for critical evaluation of that, you need to say, okay, but what age group does this apply? So then you could say age groups 8 to 12 do really well with a structured schedule. However, those in higher education require more flexibility. Or we could even make mention of maybe Learning types that people may have. Maybe somebody has ADHD or dyslexia and they require a slightly different schedule. So that is when you would look into critical evaluation. So something is true at that time with that set of data, like example, if that study was done on primary school students, it does not necessarily mean it is true for the greater expanse of all those who are involved in learning. Okay, so that's what I mean critical evaluation. Look at it, see what's missing, see what gaps they are, what is yet to be identified. Where was the study done? Was the study done in a country where maybe people enjoy a more scheduled learning time? Maybe you could even look at students who spend a lot of time on the road. How do they study? So by looking at sources as not the end all and be all, it helps you to think critically. Okay. So don't just take what's been told and then now take that one scenario and then expect it to fit for all scenarios. Poor integration of sources. Okay, this is something we can work on. If you simply add in your reference at the end of your statement and think done, dusted, got my referencing, I would advise you to incorporate your authors as you write, beginning of the sentence, middle of the sentence, integrate your references, that it flows with your sentence. It's not just a reference that you will add at the end of the sentence. And very importantly, unclear or overly broad thesis statement. Now, I know it's nice to choose a wide range topic that you're able to get lots and lots of research on. However, with a wide range of research, that also begs the question of how will you narrow it down? Okay, so make sure you are focusing on something that is specific. So, like I mentioned, the most common weakness is over-reliance on description. We must evaluate critically, compare, contrast, and judge our reliability of sources. And as much as it is so easy and common for us, avoid your laundry list of quotes. Like as in I say, just everything that we can get. You go into your online library and you find all the references related and you're like, great, that's it. That's all I'm using. I would advise to focus on collaborating them. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So here I have a quick practice that you could do by yourself. Here we got a task, develop this into a critical paragraph using PEE. And my statement is social media impacts student learning and well-being. Now, you're going to refine the point and you're going to support with at least one academic source and critically analyze. Now, this task should push you towards critical engagement. Don't just say social media affects students. It is true. However, frame it as an argument, support it with the source, and then evaluate with significance. Ask, is the evidence convincing? Are there counter arguments? And that is the critical layer that is expected of you now. Okay, so you can take a screenshot of this. You can send me your attempts. You can email them to me and I can have a look. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide. You can do this at your own time. All right, so my key takeaways from today's session. Academic writing combines voice, argument, and structure. Please use PEE for strong arguments. Always, always link back to your thesis and balance your evidence with analysis, okay? So this will help both strengthen your essays and your research writing. Okay, so my final thoughts for today. Good academic writing doesn't share knowledge, it builds an argument that convinces. So by combining your academic voice with a clear argument and structure, you can write with authority. And of course, this is essential for academic success. And again, I have borrowed that from Stella Cottrell. And I do advise you to read her books if you haven't yet read them. Okay, so these are my references that I've used for today's session. Thank you very much, and I hope it was beneficial for you. Bye.